Hey, I'm going to talk to you today about the Powertrax Grip Pro traction control system from, of course, Powertrax. So I'm getting ready to install this in my Jeep Wrangler with a Dana 35 C-clip. And at the time of this video, there's essentially no information out there about the installation instructions. So, hey, I thought I'd give you a little bit of information to help out the next guy, so you don't struggle like I have. So. There's the packaging. This is the GT44 3527 model, which again is for the Dana 35 C-clip. So it comes with this wonderful tag on it that says, "Don't freaking take this thing apart." And then they even include one of the bolts is painted to prevent you from disassembling it, because doing so, of course, voids the warranty. But then the question remains on this barrel: how do you install your C-clips once you get this thing stuck inside the differential housing? So on one side of it, there we go, there's this disc, and actually inside, I'm not even going to try to show you, but inside right now there's a disc that moves back and forth as it's shipped to me. And this hole right here, just a standard quarter 20 bolt. You drop a quarter 20 bolt into that hole, screw it into that hole, and then remove the C-clip, pull this disc out, and then that'll get us access to the inside where we can actually install our C-clips once this thing goes inside the casing. I'm not going to go through all the setup procedures for installing a differential, or I'm sorry, installing a carrier in a case. There's plenty of videos out there for that. I'll just keep this short to get the necessary information out for this particular model carrier. Carrier using the spiral gears for the traction control system. Okay, I've removed the snap ring. This was installed right here. Now this is a pretty hefty snap ring. You're going to need a decent set of snap ring pliers in order to compress this to be able to pull it out of the hole. And then there's the quarter 20 bolt is threaded into this disc. Pull this out, and there's a little nubbin on the end, and that nubbin is going to prevent the disc that's inside from moving around once we get this thing all put back together. Now, in the Dana 35 open carrier that I've removed, in that installation there was this cross pin, and of course that went crossways through the old carrier and through the spider gears, and then the two axle ends would butt up against this, which prevented the axles from sliding inward and dropping the C-clips inside the carrier. In this new assembly, instead of that pin, this disc in here is serving the purpose of that pin. So this disc will set in the center, and the two axles will butt up on either side of it, preventing the axle from sliding inward and dropping the C-clip. So with it out, then you'll insert the axle through the end into the splines, and then insert the C-clip into the end of the axle, push the axle back out, and then do the same on the other side. And once all that's done, then this drops in between the two axle ends, preventing the axles again from sliding in and dropping the clips, and then obviously reassemble in the reverse order. So all right, with all that covered, move on to the next step. I'll get my spur gear, get my ring gear installed, and we'll get on down the road. Okay, I have the ring gear installed and the new bearings. So a couple things to cover real quick. One, this does not use the standard bearings that is the stock Dana 35 bearings. Instead, you need an LM 501 1349, and you need two of those, one for each side, of course. And then for the race, the LM 501 314 for the outer race. Those replace the factory bearings on either end of the carrier when installing the Powertrax Grip Pro. But the main thing I wanted to talk about right now is there's an information sheet that comes with this that shares that there might be a clearance problem between the end of the pinion, this raised surface here on the end, and the raised surface isn't a necessary item. It's left over from the machining process. After they turn this, then that's where it's cut, and it's just extra meat. But it's also machined flat, and it's used as part of the initial setup process of the differential when it was originally assembled. The problem is, or the problem can be, is that whenever this is inserted and engaged up against the pinion, the clearance between this face and the outside of the new carrier housing, of course, this is a greater diameter than the original carrier. The clearance between the two may not be adequate, and whenever the axle flexes, then it can cause the pinion to come in contact with the carrier, and well, that's bad every time. So the instructions, the information sheet says that if you don't have a clearance of 20 thousandths of an inch, 0.02 inches between the end of this face and that body, then you have to remove meat from this face to get it to get that clearance of at least 0.02 or 0.020. Actually, 20 thousandths of an inch is what it calls for. So 0.020 inches clearance between these two whenever this is inserted at the proper depth in the housing, and this is inserted and the bearing caps are on. Then you reach in there with a feeler gauge, which is a bit of a challenge. I'll just tell you that for free. What I ended up doing is I took a feeler gauge stack apart, and I would put a feeler gauge onto the end of an extending magnet. There it is. I put my feeler gauge onto the end of my extending magnet, and then would insert that in and raise it up and run it back and forth. And if it cleared, then good. If it didn't, then I moved to a different size feeler gauge until I found that I only had 10 thousandths. So anyway, I have 10 thousandths of meat that I have to take off of the end of this, and I have every bit of that available to me here. Okay, we are at a milestone. Backlash is set, thrust is set on either side, bearing caps are torqued down. I'm just going to take a moment and mention, I think about everybody mentions it in their videos, but I'll go ahead and cover it here just to make sure everybody's got it. There's a letter on the bearing cap. This one has a Y, and the Y is horizontal, and it lines up with a horizontal Y here, and notice that they're pointed the same direction. On this side, there's also a Y, but the Y is vertical, and on the casing, it's vertical. It's very important that we keep track of these bearing caps, that they go back in the way we took them out, and that they go in on the correct side. So notice the heavy bossed area is inboard toward the carrier assembly. Okay, so what we're actually here for is I've got the passenger side axle shaft in, and the C-clip is already on it, and I've got the driver's side axle shaft sticking into the opening there, and we just reach in with our magnet. Well, try this again, because that's supposed to be easier than that. Okay, sorry about that, folks. The axle shaft wasn't actually pushed in all the way, so when I tried to stick the C-clip in, it bound up a little bit. Anyway, C-clip's installed. Now I've pushed the shaft back out. We're ready to drop the plug in and button this puppy up. Okay, the disc that we took out at the beginning, that is dropped in between the two axle shafts now, and now if one of the axle shafts tries to push in, I'm pushing in on the driver's side right now. It can't go in because that plug is stopping it, and now we put the disc in, and next I'll put the snap ring in there to hold that disc in place, pull out my 1/4-20 bolt, fill her up with oil, and down the road I go. I thought it would be helpful to finish this video up with some special tools that you might need for, or that you will need for, the Powertrax Grip Pro. Not all of these are special tools, but they may not be tools that you normally have. So again, first of all, I mentioned this earlier, you need two bearing races, LM501314, and two bearings LM501349. Those go on the ends of the carrier in place of the old size bearings that was on the original open carrier. Okay, so you will need an inch-pound torque wrench, and it cannot be a clicker. Cannot be a clicker. So you can do the dial type quarter-inch torque wrenches, quarter-inch drive torque wrenches, and inch-pounds are kind of expensive. You can pick up a deflecting beam quarter-inch drive torque wrench for about 20 bucks on Amazon. So that's the way I went, because this was the only time I needed it, this is the only purpose that I need one for. Snap ring pliers, not a specialty tool, but needs to be a heavy-duty set to handle that snap ring. If you got a light-duty set, they'll just fold up on you. Not a specialty item, I realize, but I wanted to mention that you need gear oil rated gasket maker, not just regular black Permatex. The black Permatex will be consumed by the oil, and your diff cover will eventually leak. You will need a shim pack. It does not come with a shim pack. And of course that's for the spacing on the end between the end of the bearing race and the differential housing. So you'll be installing shims on either end. There's a process to go through to establish the location of the carrier in the housing, and that process is rather involved. I'm not going to go into detail with it right here, but basically, in short summary, you drive the carrier to one side without the pinion in. You drive the carrier to one side, set your dial indicator at 0, push the carrier to the other side, measure what the total travel is. That's what your total shim requirement is. And then, depending on your particular carrier, you add a certain amount to make sure you have good compression. And then you deduct another amount for backlash allowance on between your pinion and your ring gear. So that's all differential specific. So I'm not going to name any numbers here for any carrier or any differential. So then you'll need a vernier caliper or a micrometer. Doesn't matter which one you go with, but you'll need that for measuring your shims and getting those set up whenever you're doing the measurement that I just talked about earlier. Dial indicator, mentioned earlier. Most garage mechanics don't have a dial indicator until you get into something like this. This item next, you don't have to have this, but this is a tool that I made for holding the yoke while I'm wrenching on the pinion nut. So it's just a hole on this end. This is this bar is welded to a piece of 3/4 inch pipe. Hole on this end. The bolt for the yoke goes through that, and then this arm is on a pivot, and that allows me to adjust it for different size yokes, and then a nice long 3/4 inch pipe to give me a good handle to hold on to. And why do you need this? Because in my case, the differential was a Dana 35, and it used a compression sleeve to set the bearing preload. The compression sleeve, and it used a compression sleeve to set the bearing preload. The compression sleeve doesn't even begin to collapse until you get to 295 foot-pounds of torque. So, yeah, that's if you're doing this with a ratchet or a breaker bar, you're leaning into it pretty hard to get to 300 foot-pounds of torque. But you need something to hold the pinion yoke with. You can use a big pipe wrench. It's not a great deal. They tend to bounce around on you and fall off. So take a half hour and build up something like this, and you'll be way happy with it. The last item, this is a casing spreader. If you're working on a Dana, then the Dana has 2 holes that are about this they are this diameter, and they're on either side of the pumpkin cover. So this installs vertically. Well, if you're doing it in the vehicle, it installs vertically. These two plugs, they extend out on the back side. So they extend into those two holes, and then adjust the bolt down here to spread the casing apart. So in my case, I was allowed to spread the carrier on a D35 20 thousandths of an inch, 0.020 inches is how much I was allowed to elongate that casing to make it easier to shove all these shims in there. You'll see a ton of videos on YouTube where people are doing this work without one of these spreaders, and I guarantee you they are not getting their casing set up right. They're not getting the proper preload on all their bearings. Will it fail? I don't know. You know, it depends on. I watched one video where a guy was wailing on shims with a hammer, and he goes, "Oh no, I think I broke it." Yeah, crap, you probably did. You shouldn't be wailing on with a hammer. So there you go. Quick summary. Hope you appreciate it. Thank you very much.